Kevin, what do you want the world to know about you?
Just because you have mental illness doesn't mean that your life needs to be limited. And I really hope that I can show that that is true.
What were your earliest symptoms of mental illness?
The year that I was 10, I had several instances of sexual abuse from strangers, different strangers, 2 instances. And after the second one, I came home, and that night I had my first psychosis experience. I was alone and in my attic bedroom, and started hearing this noise. Sounds like, best way to describe it would be like an orchestra tuning up, before a symphony, and it grew louder and louder, and until it was unbearably loud. And I remember I was down in the fetal position, covering my ears, and then it just stopped. And I started seeing shadow people. That night, I went downstairs. I asked my family what was that noise, and they said they didn't hear anything, and to go back to bed. In that house too, I would see what I thought were demons, and watching and waiting for something. And at that life, when I was 10, my life just suddenly became a horror film. That's the best way to put it. Behind every corner there might be something ready to scare me and do bad things.
Did you tell anybody about what you were experiencing?
No. I had a close relationship with my grandmother who lived with me, and she was very religious, and she often talked to me about the devil and God, and really ingrained this world lore of the Bible in my head. And I believe that's why my psychosis came out in that way, through demons, and I would talk to the devil. My grandmother, she could speak in tongues and would often say, different things, visions that she had and stuff. So that gave me a little comfort that what I was seeing, even though nobody else did, was probably reality. Yeah.
How did your symptoms progress as you got older?
By the time I was 13, I was drinking, smoking, using drugs, skipping school, running away a lot.
Were you doing all that to cope with the symptoms you were experiencing?
As well as the trauma of the abuse. I also had, I was living in a very interesting household where my father had very serious heart conditions, and I was always afraid he was going to die from a heart attack. So my grandmother would tell me, don't upset your father because he'll have a heart attack and die. And here I was abused, and I couldn't tell my dad because he would die. And I couldn't tell him that I see demons and things. But by the time I was 13, I went to my father, and I just told him something's wrong. Every day I just want to die, and I'm using drugs, and I can't stop. And he was there for me, and he got me some help, and I went into my first of several kids' psychiatric units, locked up.
What is a kid's psychiatric unit like?
Let me take a breath. I'm getting kind of shaky. Unit K, they called it Unit K, K for kids. And it was all people under 18. And in the 80s, 1987, it was very difficult. I learned a lot of good things about emotions. I didn't know anything about emotions and how to deal with anger and things like that, but I learned a lot of really bad lessons as well. I learned that expressions of anger would get you tied down to a table, in a rubber room. So I learned to quell my anger
Before the age of 18, how many different stays in the psychiatric unit did you have?
14 to 16, I was in 2 hospitals and a halfway house.
Do you mean those 2 years you spent all of your time in either 2 hospitals or a halfway house?
Yes. Which is a weird place to develop as a teenager. In some respects, I feel institutionalized. I've been chronically homeless since a teenager. When I was 15, I came home from the halfway house, and I didn't do so well. My dad died. I was a sophomore in high school, and that was my greatest fear growing up, is that my dad would die, and he did. And I started having symptoms, and they became too much for my family, and I got kicked out of the house.
Is it okay if you share some of the symptoms?
Yes. The main symptom that was dangerous to others was I was lighting fires. And I didn't know why I was lighting fires, but we lived in an old house, and up in the attic I was lighting these bonfires and smashing my guitars, and I would go out in the woods and light these little fires, and it was somehow healing for me, or it was doing something for me. I don't remember, but there was a lot of demon activity, because the demon activity would come and go, and with the stress. And so when my dad died, now I have a lot of demons, and I don't have a home and family anymore, really. And I dropped out of school. And that was a hard time for me. And I learned that life was now survive.
Was your mother in the picture?
She was. I'm the youngest of 8, and when my dad died, people came to support my mom, and I don't think she had a lot to give at the time. I think she was advised to let Kevin go find himself, and because people didn't know what to do with an out of control teen in those times. All the things that I did to show something was drastically wrong weren't seen as signs. I was 16, just about to turn 17. And I spent a year in a little pay-by-the-day boarding house trying to go back to school and failing. I went to school during the day, worked at the donut shop at night, and lived in this cockroach-infested place, and I couldn't do it. The principal was really nice and gave me everything he could, but the state picked me up and put me in foster care and moved me to a different part of the state where I didn't know anybody. I spent a year in foster care. It was just me and another teenager, and the woman was the foster mother, and she was really nice. She just left us alone, and we went and got jobs. And after a year, I got an apartment, but I didn't know anything about life. And I couldn't hold on to that apartment, so within 6 months, I was homeless. And
How old are you at this point?
18 and a half. So much more comfortable to have a guitar that I can hug.
I know that music has been a coping mechanism for you throughout your life. Tell me about that.
I come from an artistic family. My dad played piano, and he acted. I mean, he also worked in a warehouse. And my mom was a dancer. my older siblings all danced, and my sisters own a dance studio. And my brother played guitar. I got a guitar, and I took one lesson, and I said, nope, I don't want to do it. I threw it under the bed because I couldn't read the music, and I couldn't get it. I knew I wouldn't. But I kept it and started fooling around with it. I didn't know how to tune it, but eventually my brother taught me a couple chords, and D, C, and G, and I was going through so much, and I had no outlets except skateboarding, and so I started writing songs. I think I wrote 5 songs with those 3 chords about teenage angst and how horrible life is, and adults are horrible, and poor me. And I went to the local coffee house in my town and performed it, and everybody clapped. And I got all this positive attention, and it was very new to me, and that started me on, this is what I want to do for my life, yeah. Nobody in my life knew I was homeless. My friends didn't know, my family didn't know, I was too ashamed. And I went to Harvard Square because it's very intellectual, and I knew nobody in my life would go there. I wouldn't see my family and friends there.
So is that like where all the Harvard students congregate?
Yeah. But I found a group of friends there in this place called The Pit, and they were teenagers who were runaways or homeless for whatever reason. And we didn't share our stories, but we shared our resources and our time together, and people called us pit rats. And I did that for a year and a half or so.
Where would you sleep?
I slept in a park for a while, and I would play guitar during the day. And then I got my guitar stolen, so I didn't sleep in the park anymore. I found this public bathroom that people didn't know about, and they would lock it at night, so I would sneak in there and wait for them to lock it, and I would be in there, and I would go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and I'd feel safe. Relatively safe. And then I got into a shelter in Harvard Square, Church Street shelter. The thing about being a homeless teen is there are a lot of predators. And that was a big issue, is that I had this vulnerability, and I think predators could see that in me. I don't know, but I got approached and followed by a lot of predators, and in the homeless shelters, a teenager is prey to that, and so I needed a way out, and my only way out was to join the army, and so that's what I did. And I loved it. I loved the army. I was like a hippie kid, Mr. Peace and Love, but I felt like it was the first thing that my family might be proud I was doing. And my family was like, what are you doing joining the army? Are you crazy? And I'm like, yes, I am. And I went to the army, and I loved it. I loved all the exercise. There was marching and singing, and everyone was proud of what they were doing, and I was proud. It was great. I was infantry, and after training in Georgia, I got injured. My knee got injured permanently, so I couldn't stay in the army. And my brother was living in Alaska at the time, and nobody really wanted me to come back to Boston, I don't think. So my brother said, why don't you come up here and you can try to put your life together. And
how old are you at this point when you first go to Alaska?
24, 25.
You arrive in Alaska, what happens?
Things go pretty well. I was in great shape. And my brother was nice. He's 3 years older than me, and he was being a nice big brother. I got a job, and I met a girl, fell in love, and we had a kid. And I was a dad, and my symptoms were less. I wasn't one, I wasn't living alone. And I was living with animals and girlfriend and kids. She had kids. So my fear of demons went down. If people are around, I don't get so afraid of demons if they're in my life. And that's why a pet is so important to me. So my symptoms were low for a few years, but then that relationship went to hell. I stayed in Alaska for 10 years. After the 4 years of relationship, I had to leave because it was physically abusive towards me. And the kids were she had another child, and they were getting caught up in it. And so I had to leave the relationship, and I was able to get my son full custody. But I was homeless, and my symptoms just kind of took off. And being a single dad, I could never really hold a job very long because I would get stressed out and my symptoms would go up, and I would get overwhelmed and I would lose the job or have to quit. So I wasn't in a good position to be a dad, but I made it my priority. Sorry. And it was really hard. And when I was 35, it was me and my son Tyler. I was living at an inn in a really, really kind of bad part of town. And I was working to pay the rent for that night and stealing all of our food. And the supermarket was aware of what I was doing, and they eventually caught me and I got arrested, which I think was hard on my son because he was there when I got arrested. And,
How old was he?
6. And we've talked about it, and it brings him to tears too. And I went to court, and I was manic, full blown manic, and I couldn't speak. I wasn't verbal. And my brother brought me to court and said, he can't even speak for himself. There's something going on. I don't know what's going on. And I was blessed with a judge who could see that. And she said, I'm going to defer you to mental health court, which I didn't know existed. And so I went into the hospital, and it was a very different experience than when I was a kid, because I was an adult and the doors weren't locked. There was no restraints. I could swear. And they tried me out on different medications, and a lot of the medications was making my hallucinations worse. But I didn't feel comfortable to tell anyone about my hallucinations. And there was a woman who was a patient, and she was very nice. We spent a couple of days talking, and I think she could see that I saw things because I was watching things and talking to things. And she said to me, I see things too, and it's okay to tell people. And I was shocked, but she talked me through it. And I went to my psychiatrist and I said, okay, I know I have bipolar 1, but there's also this other thing that I see things and hear things and feel things that nobody else does. And so they added psychosis to my labels. But to me, I remember getting the diagnosis as a blessing, because my whole life I just believed God made me wrong. He didn't care enough to make me right. And fundamentally, the way I am made is just wrong, and I'm a bad person. That's what I thought what was wrong with me, and that's not an illness you can fix, And then someone said, no, you're a good person. And, you're not a bad person. You have this illness and this disorder, and we can work on it. And that was just a miracle to me. Yeah.
Before getting treatment and help, you spent 6 years as a father experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
What was that like? How did you and your son cope and continue to live?
I can't believe that we did. I think God had a lot to do with that. God and I have a very interesting and sometimes head-butting relationship, but it's very close. And it's hard to be a parent. It's hard to be a single parent. And you have to take the horror that you're seeing and compartmentalize it, because you have this person who just needs someone, and you want to love that person the way you weren't loved, and you want to give that person the attention that you didn't get, and let them know that they're a wonderful being and you love them, and you want to feed all that into them while you have really bad things happening. One of the hallucinations that I often have is when I'm talking to someone, I will see a demon in their face, momentarily, and their face will just change into a demon and scare me, and then just go back to regular. And so I'm trying to parent my son and love him, and then I'm looking at him and he's a demon, and he's scaring me. But then I have to put that aside and say, this is my son, and he's the best thing that I've ever done. I often wake up at an emotional zero, in crisis mode. I don't remember my dreams, but I wake up and I'm sweating and I'm panicking and I'm having lots of external dialogues that are yelling at me and are very negative. And I often didn't get a lot of sleep as well. And so that's how I start a lot of days. Not every day, nothing is always and never, but a lot of my days that way. And then I work my way up the emotional ladder through fight or flight and hopefully up to safe and social. But I wrote this song just as a way to express to those who might not understand why I wake up grumpy. In that, in the morning, I need my time to process all this information that is coming in. A lot of it is very difficult to deal with and doesn't have to do with the same reality as everybody else.
What was the song called?
Good Morning, Psychosis. Yeah. Comments are constant, racing, repeating, consistent and careless, combative, misleading, defeating the grandiose plans I'm creating, collecting debris, protecting and deflecting, and I know they're listening with sneaking suspicion. They hear all I say and it keeps me from speaking, so lock me away as an act of contrition. This madness is passion without safety restrictions. I won't open the door, volunteer to the dark, where the demons wait patient to make me their mark, where they're careless with death and they swallow your soul, and it plays itself out and keeps me less than whole, and the shadows keep watching and silently waiting. They shroud me in darkness, they keep pulling and baiting, and motionless and baseless they plot and conspire, drawn from the youth where they first lit the fire. Hey, 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 well, Well, I argue and argue all day in my head, and I lose to the intrusive thoughts left unsaid. And they hear me, manipulate and steer me. They question my purpose and won't leave me be. Resistant, non-compliant, fight, freeze, or flight. And they know what I'm thinking, and it's all black and white. And they argue and argue, but the points are all mute. The resulting waves are short but acute. Hey, well, they say it's a metaphor, illustrative, unreal, recycled from book songs and crossroads where I've been. But my demons were demons with form and physique, waiting for when I was lost, alone, and weak.
That was beautiful.
I go through a lot when I play it.
What do you experience when you play it?
I experience a flood of visuals, and I get really anxious, and then the chorus comes in, and I get to just release it. And for me, that it's just me letting it all out and acceptance, you know, that this is where I'm starting, but I'm still gonna keep climbing.
Why do you think it is that so many of the world's greatest artists struggle with their mental health?
That's a great question. I think some of it has to do with people with mental health have a lot to think about, and they spend a lot of time in their mind, and they need creative ways to express it.
At age 35, you were diagnosed with bipolar and psychosis symptoms?
Yes, with psychosis. Yeah.
Was that the first time you had ever been formally diagnosed with anything?
Yes. When I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with major depression. And they didn't really diagnose bipolar then yet because it hadn't had any manic episodes. It's just all been depression. I'm a very depressive bipolar person. But then I was diagnosed with bipolar 1, with psychosis, PTSD, because they don't officially recognize CPTSD.
Were you ever diagnosed with schizophrenia?
Only recently. Because with schizoaffective, you have your psychosis during your mood disorder. And I also have my symptoms while I'm not in a mood disorder. And that's the difference between the two. and schizophrenia is so it's important that I distinguish that because if I'm having symptoms and I go to an ER and I say I'm schizoaffective, I'm bipolar with psychosis, then they're going to assume I'm having an episode, but I might not be. So if I say I'm schizoaffective, they could say, okay, maybe you're not having an episode, but you're having symptoms.
So your formal diagnosis today is schizoaffective disorder?
Yes, with bipolar 1 and PTSD and inattentive ADD and food avoidance eating disorder.
When were you formally diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder?
Year and a half ago, they changed it.
How old are you today?
52. Oh, no, 51.
Let's go back to age 35, and then we'll work our way back up to the schizoaffective disorder diagnosis.
Sure.
What happened after you were eventually through treatment?
Okay, so I was going through the courts, and I was on probation for theft. And they said I needed to stay in Alaska for a year and go through probation. So I was talked into having my son come home to Boston, live with my family, which was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I can't emphasize that more than anything. My son never moved back in with me, and I decided that my sister could give him a better life than if he lived with me, and he could play sports, he could do his hobbies. If he's living with me, I can't afford those things. I stayed there in Alaska while my son moved, and I finished my whole probation in 6 months. And then had to save up money for a plane ticket home. And I came home and I lived with one of my brothers and sister-in-law and started learning about mental health because I didn't know anything about it. I went to day programs, full-time day programs, and I think they're called partial programs, but and I got on Social Security disability. That was a chore. And I made recovery my full-time job. If I'm not gonna work, I grew up believing if you're gonna be alive, you should be working. And so if I'm not gonna work, then recovery is gonna be my job. And I learned about becoming a peer specialist. And that was a big thing for me because here was a position that I could use my story and the things that I've gone through to help others. And why that was important to me because it gave purpose to everything I went through.
What does a peer specialist do?
They meet someone where they're at in their diagnosis and help provide them with the education and the resources to lift themselves up. And in many various ways. A lot of peer specialists work on mental health teams with psychiatrists, and it's someone that a client can talk to who's been there and has lived experience. Not necessarily just someone with a degree. So I learned I could use my experience and get trained and become a peer specialist. And it gave purpose to all the things that I had gone through, which all that stuff never had purpose before. It was just a horrible world. Now, here, God has given me this life where now I can help someone who's been abused or gone through neglect or has gone homeless. I've gone through all these different little traumas. Now I can help all these different little groups of people. And I thought, that's a blessing, you know? And so I dove into that. Yeah, at 35.
How long did you work in that field?
4 years. I got off Social Security, which is my big goal, and I was working full time. I had a girlfriend, I had a dog, and I was doing well, but the relationship got difficult, and I was trying to work through my childhood trauma, through therapies. And my mom died, and I was kind of living on my own, trying to pay my rent and have this dog, and life became overwhelming. So I left working full time and went back on Social Security. But in order to do so, I had to go back in the homeless shelter and start over. So I had to leave my job and everything, and it was me and my dog, Okami. My dog has been a big part of my recovery in helping me with my symptoms. She went to go stay with my best friends, and I went into a homeless shelter. But this time it was a little different. The VA, the veterans, I'm a veteran, and they found out that I was homeless, and they said, you shouldn't be homeless, you're a veteran. And they provided me with resources. And I got into a veteran shelter, which was a very different, in a positive way, experience.
Do you experience symptoms on a regular basis today? Like today during this interview, have you experienced any symptoms?
No. I do experience, I don't see shadow people as much as I used to. I worked through that in therapy and with a therapist and confronting the things that I saw. And since doing that, they've really decreased. But that being said, there are several nights a month where I will text my girlfriend and say, there's a demon in my room, I'm really scared. And she pretends she's Glinda the Good Witch and casts a spell from the distance, which is very sweet. But so I still struggle with that. I don't believe demons exist and the devil exists. And I have a real unique belief in what God is. But I still get very terrified at night when I'm alone. And since not having my dog the past year, those symptoms have really crept up. And there's a lot of nights where I get really scared that I'm a 10-year-old kid again. And
how long did you have your dog for before he or she?
She.
Before she eventually passed?
9 years.
How did she help you during that time?
One, she helped me feel safe from my paranoia and because I was never alone. So that was 9 years where I wasn't worried about demons attacking me, and I slept a little better and felt safer. She was a 100-pound pit bull, and also she was hypervigilant, and she had to go up and talk to everybody and see everything. So when I was really high symptoms, and I would go into a store, and she would greet people, and she wouldn't greet this one person that I felt was suspicious, then I'd say, well, that's probably not a real person, you know? So she helped me in that. She got to track my moods, know when I was upset, and cuddle with me when I'm anxious. I would get shaky a lot when I talk, and she would come and putting a 100-pound dog on your chest really helps.
What was it like losing her?
It was so hard. It's still hard. I saw a picture of her today, and it made me tear up. And I couldn't imagine life without her. Afterwards, I remember telling my friends and family, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't imagine going back to scared every night and not having this daily support that I get, you know, and this daily dose of love, which I wasn't getting a lot of love, you know, and this dog would just give me love no matter what. So it was a big loss. It still is a big loss a year later.
I know you wrote a song for your dog.
Yeah.
Would you like to play it?
Yeah, this is a song really of just how much I love her and gratitude. And she inspires me to, like, I want to go out and be better for her, you know? So this is called Inspired. My hands are shaking, so we'll see how I do. Knew I was looking, never thought I'd find what would make me whole. Never spend much time, and now there's something new I'm feeling here. Something good I wanna make it mine. She don't need to, but she still tries. I'm inspired by the look in her eyes. Don't need to, but she still tries. inspired by the look in her eyes. Always been the quiet one, there's been nothing to say. My mind keeps on racing with thoughts of her all day. And now there's something new I'm feeling here, something good, I wanna make it stay. I don't need to hear her say it shows in so many different ways. She don't need to, but she still tries. And I'm inspired by the look in her eyes. She don't need to, but she still tries. And I'm inspired by the look in her eyes. I went into the shelter for 9 months, and I was away from my dog. Didn't really get any visitors or anything. Holidays came and went, and then I got into the housing that I'm in today, which is technically temporary housing, but you can stay there as long as you want. I've been there 4 years, and it's all veterans, and I've made some nice relationships there. There's a guy that lives there who plays drums, so I go down and play bass with him, and he teaches me about funk music. I have strict daily routines that I do every day that are priority to me, because my job is to recover, and doing those rewires my brain. My brain is very negative and uses absolute words and very bad words, and so in order to rewire it, I feed myself with positive, and that's all very intentional. I have this wiring in my brain for suicidal ideation, and ever since I became a dad, I knew this is an issue, because my dad died when I was young, and I don't want to die on my son. So I actively, in my brain, started looking for, on a daily basis, reasons to be here, in all the little things. When you're walking down the street in the fall and the leaves are tumbling and wrestling down the street, that's a reason to be here. And sunrises, music, and your kids. So back then, I really started training myself in just to prevent myself, to counterbalance the ideation that I was having. Yeah, because I was scared. I didn't want to die on my son. Yeah, this song is called Before, and the last time I was about to go into a homeless shelter, and I had the idea that if the sun rises and I'm still here, I'm going to kill myself. And I had a plan of what I was going to do. But until then, I'm going to try not to. And all my coping skills weren't working. I didn't want to go back into the homeless shelter ever again. So I wrote a song knowing that here I am again thinking about killing myself. And I've been here many times for the last 25 years or so. And I've always made it through, except for the one time that I tried to. But it's all likelihood that I'll be here again. I'll want to kill myself again, or I might end up going into a homeless shelter again. And I wrote this song to get me through that night, and also to get me through the next time I'm in this situation, and the next time after that. So this is called Before. I might be tired, but I've been tired before. It's not my first time I made my way back from the floor. And the harder I fall, I forget what I'm fighting for, and I might be down, but I've been down before. It's gonna be a fight, but I've been a fighter before. It's not my first time in battle, but now I am at war, where I get beaten down, battered and sore. I can be a fighter where I couldn't before. And it might be dark, but I found my way before. Though I can see no light, my feet recognize this floor, where it's weathered and worn is the path that I look for, and it's a damn hard time, but I was hard done before. And I might be down, but I've been down before. It's not my first time in battle, but now I am at war. And the harder I climb, the more I'm fighting for, and I might be tired, but I will climb until I soar. Yeah, I might be tired, but I will climb until I soar. And I will climb until I soar.
When somebody finishes watching this video, what do you most hope they remember from it?
If they have a mental disorder, or they're struggling with the mental disorder, there's life beyond stability. I feel like the industry just focuses on stability, which is a great thing. You need to find stability. But you don't have to give up there. Everybody's had dreams, and you're in this life that you can go for those dreams too, even though you have a mental disorder. And your potential is just, what you make of it. And so I hope they get some inspiration to reach a little further for their dreams.